Means it's time for the Neil Greenberg program. Hello, Greenberg. How do you do?
I'm doing super duper. How are you?
We're good, man.
Yeah, today would have been a good day to come in studio and do this thing.
Yeah, dog.
Yeah, I need to be invited.
You're invited.
You're always invited. We told you that.
Well, I should be there then.
All right, our boy Greenberg, you can read all of his work in the Washington Post. Kind enough to join us via the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude makes the most reliable HVAC products in the DMV. You can give Neil a follow at @ngreenberg. All right, dude. A lot has happened since we last spoke. Let's start locally. Commanders, Cliff Kingsbury's gone. David Blau is in. What do you make of it?
I think this is a really bold move. It also is a high-risk move. But it's nice to see that the organization is trying to keep talent within the building, especially when that talent is coveted elsewhere. I see a lot of people upset that he's jumping from assistant quarterbacks coach to play caller with no prior experience, but that shouldn't matter nowadays. I mean, we've seen a lot of non-traditional paths within sports become successful. New Jersey Nets hired like a bunch of non-basketball people into their operations. The Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL hired a Harvard chemist as their GM. So there's a lot of different paths. I mean, I'm sorry?
A chemist?
Yeah. Eric Tolsky was a Harvard chemist with a bunch of patents before he became the general manager of Carolina. So I think that this is good. We won't know how good until he starts doing stuff, and I do have some concerns. But I do like it. I mean, keep him in the building and keep some continuity with the language and terminology. And by all accounts, he's got a good relationship with Jaden Daniels. So, let's see what happens.
People have to understand that the landscape in pro sports has changed drastically. It's not about you got to be around 30, 40 years anymore. You look around the league right now, there are guys that are coaches in their 30s, early 30s, and mid-30s. There are guys that are GMs, offensive coordinators, defense coordinators that probably have 1, maybe 2 years of experience. And they've done a good job. A lot of them have been exceptional. So you can't sit up here and just necessarily put the amount of time. If a guy's been a D-line coach for 5 years and become a D coordinator, it's going to be a little learning curve for a little bit there, but it comes down to how much you're going to put into it.
Yeah, and, Blau has been around the game itself as a player. He's also been around a lot of smart football minds. And, no one knows, we don't know the guy, right? Like, none of us really know the guy to know how much of a handle he has on it. You have to defer to the building in that regard. They obviously know what's on the line, right? Dan Quinn is in a pivotal third season, I think. He obviously knows what's at stake. The executives know what's at stake. They know where they went first in year one of Jane Daniels. They know where they're at this year, obviously. So I find it hard to believe they're just going to be like, oh, well, you know what? Let's just throw this dart and hope it works out. I mean, they think that they got their guy. The guy was in the building, and they want to make sure that there's upward mobility. My biggest concern would be, how does this change the drafts and free agent strategy? Do you maybe not lean as hard on the defensive side, even though that's a big need to try to help out a first-year coordinator on the offensive side, knowing that Dan Quinn has obviously a lot of years on the defensive side? That would be like my biggest concern. That was like one of the first things I thought about. But again, we have to wait and see what they do, and then come opening week, we'll have a much better handle on it.
Very interesting times. On the defensive side of the ball, where do you think Washington is in this process, and what do you think needs to change for the defense in Washington? Because for me, I'm far more concerned about the personnel than I am the next DC.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I agree. They have to upgrade the defense. I know there's some talk about perhaps Brian Flores. You can connect some dots there. I always wonder this: if you have a head coach that is from your side of the ball, right? In this case, Dan Quinn being defensive, how enticing is the defensive coordinator, Joe? Like, how much autonomy are you going to have? How much input are you going to have in personnel decisions? All that kind of plays into it for me. Also, from the names that they're talking about, this is going to be a stepping stone, right? At least Blau maybe has some time in seat. On the defensive side, a guy like Brian Flores, I'm sure, is going to want to, get into the head coaching ranks sooner rather than later, and will probably have that opportunity because that's just how the NFL works. So then you're going to have to be in this position looking again. There's just a lot of moving parts, I think, with the defensive side. And, let's face it, they have a lot of work to do. I don't know how enticing of a position it is, when you look at it from all different angles. It's a tough one because, like I said, you don't know how much capital is going to be committed to improving that side. And then if it is, how much improvement do you actually see?
Yeah, and how much capital is available to commit to that side, right? At least from a draft standpoint. Talking with our friend Neil Greenberg here on the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude makes the most reliable HVAC products in the DMV. Greenberg, what has been... All right, we're going to zoom out from the local 53 to all over the NFL. There's 32 teams. What has been the biggest surprise coaching change so far for you?
I think the Harbaugh one was surprising because if that kick goes the other way, are we even having this discussion? Like, does he?
You wonder.
That just seems tough. I know he's been there a long time, and the results haven't been maybe as great as it should be, and maybe there's some locker room issues, but. Man, you got to think though, if that kick goes his way and he's in the playoffs, are we really having this conversation? At least at this point, it would have been 4 straight years in the playoffs, and 6 of the last 8, 7 of the last 8. So that's successful. That'll play in any organization. But you also, that to me was the most surprising. I actually came out early in the season with which coaches I think were on the hot seat. And I think I listed 8, and I think 6 are now gone, which, I think is good for me, but it's also showing me that it's predictable, right? Like, you can kind of hone in on what the league is looking for at this point. They want success. They want playoff appearances. They want success in the playoffs. And, the regular season part of it doesn't mean as much because my model heavily weights postseason performance. That was the most surprising to me only because of the circumstances surrounding it.
But it gets to a point, I think you look at John, also you look at Mike Tomlin, 18, 19 years. Most coaches never get to that point. But after 18, 19 years and you see some of the same old, if you see them with both of those guys, it just gets old. It gets stagnant. And sometimes change is necessary. And it's not for just that team, but I think for the coaches as well. Because Andy Reid got rejuvenated like hell once he left Philly.
Yeah, but looking at it from the business perspective, which this is obviously, getting into the playoffs is lucrative. Even if it's a one and done, getting into the playoffs from an NFL ownership perspective is lucrative. But like you said, the Harbaugh situation was a long time. I think in my opinion, the locker room issue and some of the discord between him and Lamar Jackson probably played more into it. So you only have Lamar Jackson for a finite amount of time as well, and you want to do the most you can with him in terms of team success. And with Tomlin, his only claim to fame was being above 500 for a number of years in a row. The team wasn't good. Objectively speaking, the Pittsburgh teams under Mike Tomlin have not been good for a while. You look at their score differential, point differential, et cetera, and then, couple that with their playoff exits if they even made it. That was pretty subpar for a long time. To his credit, he's done a lot with not great quarterbacks, which is tough in this league. But I do think that was definitely time for him to move on, if not a little too late.
It's interesting. What do you think the best job available is?
Probably. Gosh, I don't know.
I think it's got to be Baltimore, right?
Yeah, Baltimore, because they have what you need. Like, you don't want to start from scratch. You don't want to, you have an MVP level, quarterback, which is one of the hardest things to get. So I think that would probably be where my number one would be. Ravens number one. I think Atlanta's probably number two. I think Atlanta has a lot of good things going, and I've said this before. I think the Giants were a lot better than they looked on paper. I think a lot of improvement could be made there very, very quickly. So I like the Giants opening as well.
What do you think about Tennessee? With you got a lot of money, brand new stadium, young quarterback, and a coach with some clout can go in there and get a lot of the control.
Yeah, I would say Tennessee and maybe even Miami would be very, very similar situations in terms of how fast can you right the ship. And obviously you need the most important pieces in play. So the Titans for me would definitely be slightly ahead of Miami, and certainly ahead of like Las Vegas and Arizona and Cleveland, which I think are going to be tough spots to fill, relatively speaking. But yeah, Tennessee is certainly an interesting spot. Miami, gosh, I mean, the Tua was like an MVP talked about guy preseason, and then all of a sudden he's just like persona non grata. The NFL moves so fast, man. I know we talk about that for like running backs, but even quote unquote franchise quarterbacks don't have a long shelf life sometimes.
Talking with our friend Neil Greenberg here on the Rude Guest Hotline. You give Neil a follow at @ngreenberg. We haven't got to talk about any games yet. What was the biggest surprise for you last week, and what do you expect in this upcoming week?
All the surprises. I mean, that was just a weird week.
It was wild.
Just a lot of just wild finishes. I mean,
to me, the Bears was the craziest, but yeah,
I thought Carolina played a lot better than I thought. I did not think Carolina was going to be in that game at all. Obviously, like you said, the Bears-Chicago game was really weird. I thought Green Bay was going to have. This was the year that Green Bay had a deep run, but it all fell apart for them. Jacksonville. I was also high on Jacksonville, man, and Buffalo just snatches it late. But yeah, I think the most surprising was how good Carolina was able to keep pace with the Rams, which they ended up falling short, but they were certainly in it for a little bit.
Looking at the defense of we've talked about it a lot, the defense of Houston. Can that defense carry them?
Yeah, it can. I mean, they're good. They're good defensively. They're the type of team. You always look at. I don't want to face these guys in the playoffs type of a situation, and I do think Houston's there because, if they stifle your offense, I mean, you're cooked, right? Like that's it. It's kind of over. I will say offense carries a lot of freight in the playoffs. I know they've said for a long time that defense wins championships, but I think the Houston and New England game, they're mirror images of each other, right? Houston really great defensively, underwhelming offensively, and New England kind of flip-flopped. But generally speaking, in those type of matchups, the offensive team is the one that comes out ahead. So I'm actually backing the Patriots in that one. But the margin of error is I'm on Patriots -2.5 for sure. Based on what I've looked at with these type of mirror matches, it wouldn't surprise me if I look at New England -6.5 alt line, very intriguing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting games. I think the Rams-Bears line is weird. Bears are home dogs after they just keep winning, keep coming up with crazy stuff?
Yeah, they got a lot of injuries now, though, right? Starting left tackle, their best linebacker, some at cornerback. Cluster injuries like that will hurt a team because you don't have time to get other players up to speed as much as you like. So the Rams number is a little bit weird, -3.5, kind of in no man's land there. But I do think the Rams will be able to take this one.
And then lastly, I wanted to make sure I made time for this. Caps get a big win last night. Danny Frank's cousin, Ethan Frank, with a monster game. How we feeling about these Caps as we're inching closer to this Olympic break?
I feel good. They're really strong at 5-on-5. They're controlling play based on a lot of the advanced metrics that are out there, like shot percentage and expected goals. They're doing really well in the high danger areas. I don't think there's a lot of fluky stuff that's pushing them up. So the comeback last night after what looked like might be another losing game where they fell down 2-0 isn't surprising because that's the type of foundation that they have. So it's not fluky. They get a guy like Ethan Frank, injecting some pace into it. Obviously Ovechkin and Wilson, we've talked a lot about them. So yeah, I like this Caps team. I think they're going to be just fine. They're good. Everything says they should be good. And if they have some, downs, kind of some down games, I would look for them to bounce back pretty quickly.
And that Metro division's still so jumbled. Carolina's setting the pace, and they're probably the best team in the division. But like everybody else is all just kind of stacked up. So as long as Washington kind of stays in that hunt and gets right, in late March, I think you're fine, right?
Yeah, they're probably the second best team in the division, no matter what the standings say.
That's kind of what I thought. And so they got a 6-game roadie coming up. They're going Denver.
Brother.
They go Denver, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Seattle, Detroit before they're home. When you see a hockey team going, is that the father's trip, the mentor's trip? Are they doing that in that roadie?
No, I think they had it already.
Oh, they just had it. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's just that's a West Coast swing.
That's a grind, though.
That is a grind. And then they're only home for 2, and then they got to go to Philadelphia. Yeah. So they're going to be, and they don't really have like a comparable home stretch, right? It's only like a couple games here and there until you get into middle of March. But yeah, that's tough. Colorado, that's going to be a tough game. Edmonton, obviously, they have some star players there.
Yes,
you got to just hope for.
What make that trip better? Win.
Right, I was about to say you gotta grind out some points. Like you can't. You got to take a point whenever you can, and just come back healthy.
Yeah, man. I don't want to ask you about my Maryland Terrapins, but good God, it's ugly to watch, dude.
Yeah,
that's enough. You could just say yeah.
I was just actually talking to Scott Allen about the Atlantic 11 and just the group in general.
Forgive me for not knowing. Is the Atlantic 11 back? I used to be a voter.
No, I'm trying to convince him to do something with it to bring it back. I will say Atlantic 11 fans should definitely check out his latest Commander's newsletter. Because they might find a neat little thing in there.
All right, send me that. George Mason, by far the best team in town. Greenberg, we got a boogie. Thank you for the time, brother.
I agree.
Virginia says hi. Love you.